Alright class, welcome to our next video, 3-2. We're now, well, I guess we're still continuing to look at transversals and the different angle pairs that we learned in 3-1, but now we're very specifically talking about transversals that cut parallel lines. If you properly, or performed, I guess I should say, if you performed the GeoGebra activity properly, then a lot of this you might actually already know, which is cool. This will just be a little bit of review. So what we need to remember here, when parallel lines are cut by a transversal, the angle pairs are always going to be congruent or supplementary. All right, congruent or supplementary. Hopefully you guys are seeing that on the page before all of your different angle pairs and the different angles. All right, so let's talk about which ones are which. When we have corresponding angles, okay, all of these you'll notice start with like the same phrase, and we're going to ask you to write them. So if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of corresponding angles are congruent. Okay? Corresponding, congruent. Corresponding, congruent. Now, we have other angle pairs, right? We have alternate interior, alternate exterior. So the same thing. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of alt-int angles are congruent. And alternate exterior, same thing. All right. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of alt-ext angles are congruent. Notice I'm just using shorthand. Feel free. Like, I'm not asking you guys. I know in previous years they're like, oh my gosh, you're making me write paragraphs. I'm really sorry. So use as much shorthand as you can. Just not so much that I don't understand what you're saying. Okay? Alright, let's change colors now just because these next two are different. Alright, now we have same sides, interiors, exteriors. So again, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of same side interior, or same side int angles, now we're supplementary. Okay? Now we're supplementary. And it's going to be the same thing with exterior. So if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of same side exterior angles are also supplementary. All right. Now the last one, we already know this. We've talked about this before. Vertical angles. And actually, let me just change colors so we know they kind of match up with these others. We know vertical angles are always congruent. Alright, so anything purple, if you notice I did stuff in purple or pink. Purple, congruent, 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 congruent. Pink, supplementary, supplementary. Alright, so now let's put this into action. Let's see what's going on here. Here is our first example up at the top. And we have two parallel lines. We know they're parallel. I don't know, we haven't said this yet, but we know they're parallel because of the markings. Just like how congruence has tick marks, right? Or angles have arc marks, congruent angles have arc marks. Parallel lines have these little arrows that show that they are parallel to each other. Now, ABF and BFG are blank. So we need to figure out the angle pair relationship first. And if I see ABF is over here, ABF, so right here at this corner, and BFG, oh, BFG is right over here. So if you look at those two angles, hopefully we agree that my transversal is DH, right? DH is my transversal. And I would look and I would say, oh, well, my interior of the two parallel lines is right here. So what do we notice? Well, we see that our angles are one's on the left, one's on the right. So we know we're in alternate. And where are our angles? Are they between the two parallel lines or outside? Oh, they're definitely between, right? They're inside this pink shaded part. So we have alt-int angles. And what do we know about alt-int angles? We know they are congruent. So if we know that we're trying to find the measure of BFG, well, that means we can look at ABF to help us out. And we knew ABF was 30, so BFG also has to be 30. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If ABF and BFG are congruent, well, then they have to have the same angle measure. So the angle measure of ABF is the same as BFG. Okay? Now, it changes a little when we look at other angles. ABF, okay, so ABF's the same over here. But now we're looking at BFE. Okay, so I'm going to try and change colors here. So we're still looking at ABF. And actually, just to stay organized, I'm going to show that's purple. And now we're talking pink as well. Okay, so ABF is right here. And BFE is actually right here. Okay? And so what would we say about these two angles? These two angles are on the same side, and they're both between the parallel lines. So we have same side interior here, guys. We have same side interior angles. And we know that same side interior angles are supplementary. All right, so we have a little bit of math to do here, because if we know ABF is 30, well, what did we learn? What do we do to get the supplement? We know that the supplement is always just 180 minus the angle. So 180 minus 30 is equal to 150, and so we know that BFE has to be 150 degrees. All right, let's take a look at this next one. If we go down here, excuse me, let's again go, let's go purple. No, let's start with pink this time, okay? So I'm going to look at GEH and ACE. If I look at GEH, well, GEH is this 105, so I'm going to mark it. And I also look, oh, ACE. ACE is right here. All right. Now, kind of like that. So now if I know these are my two angles, then I know my transversal has to touch them both, so I know that this line going down the middle has to be my transversal, which also means then that I know that my interior is going to be kind of like right there. So I'm just going to kind of shade that in so we can use that to help. All right. Let's be careful here, because I can clearly see that these two angles are on the same side of the transversal, but one's inside and one's outside. If one's inside and one's outside, does anyone remember? Hopefully you guys are saying corresponding. The other way to think about it, if you don't like thinking inside outside, is that they're both below the lines, right? Like this one is below this parallel line. ACE is below this one, and this 105, or the GEH, is below this other parallel line. Okay, so if they're both below, they're both in the same spot. We talk about that being corresponding, and we learned on the last page that corresponding angles have to be congruent. Okay, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Corresponding angles have to be congruent if the lines being cut are parallel, okay? Have to be parallel, that's important. So now, if we knew GEH was 105, ACE then also has to be 105. All right? Now, if we look at GEH and ACB, GEH is over here. ACB, oh, ACB's up here. Okay, so let's look at those, and hopefully you guys agree with me that again they're on the same side. And this time they're both on the outside, so we have same side exterior angles. And we know that same side, same side, ooh, I should write that. I didn't do that in my notes. Same side, supplementary. My bad. Please add that. All right, so yeah, we know that same side exterior angles are going to have to be supplementary to each other. So once again, we need to remember definition of supplementary. If we have one angle, then all we have to do is 180 minus the angle to get its supplement. which is 75 degrees. All right? Okay. Cool. Last thing I want to do here, I want to make a little chart for you guys. I don't know if you guys see it like this, but I look at kind of like, I almost see like letters. So up here, I don't know if you see it, but I drew like, oh, you can't see what I'm looking at. You see, I almost like made a Z here. All right. If I'm looking and I see a Z, that's a Z, I know it's going to be alternate interior angles. My other ones that I saw, and I know it's a little harder here, but I almost am like seeing a C. I know it's a backwards C, but if you see a C, you can say that those are same side int angles. And then this other one down here that is kind of goofy, but I don't know if you saw it. This angle right here in the transversal, it kind of made like a letter F. So if you ever see a letter F, we know that it's going to be corresponding. That is just kind of like some tricks that we've learned over the years of teaching this that some people have found useful. So if you want to think about those, you're more than welcome to write them down and think about them. But again, that's just extra stuff. You don't necessarily need that if you understand about same side of the transversal and inside, outside, all that good stuff. Okay? Okay. Whew. All right, let's do a few of these. I don't think we're going to do all of them just because I don't want you to just be watching a video forever and ever. But let's for sure start with something like number 5. I think this is a good problem to just get started with. Alright, so if you notice, guys, I have information about two angles. One of them is here, the 100 degrees. The other one's up or down here, excuse me. So the idea here is that if I know these are my two angles, and I know these lines are parallel, well, I can write an equation, alright? If we look at these two angles, I would say they are what angle pair? Well, they're on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're on the outside of the parallel lines. So I'm saying that these are alt xed angles. Okay, again, they're on opposite sides of the transversal, and they are outside of the parallel lines. Opposite, outside. So I know alternate exterior angles are going to be congruent to each other. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, we want you to give a little bit of an explanation, like kind of write a sentence about how you know that this is going to work out. So the sentence is going to go something like this. If parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alt xed angles are congruent. Okay? So again, the if parallel lines are cut by a transversal, that's going to be standard. Every single time that's going to be there. The part that's going to change is right here. Okay? You have to identify the angle pair, and then you have to identify congruent or supplementary. Okay? What's really nice, though, is if they're congruent, well, then we can set up a nice equation. We can say if congruent angles have to have the same measure, right? So I'm just going to set up one angle has to equal the other. Okay? And now we solve, just like what we were doing in Chapter 1. All right, so 3y equals 90, y equals 30. And so now I know that y has to be 30. Okay? It's very important to always find the transversal. So as we move on to something like number 6, notice now we're getting two variables. We want x and y. It's important, though, for you to understand that, like, to get x, you have to find the transversal that it's touching, right? Is it this one? No, it's not that one. Because we couldn't set up any equations about 2x and y. But what we could do is we could say that this is the transversal. Yeah? And then we can say that 2x right here has to kind of match with that angle right there. And what would we say is that angle pair relationship? Well, I would say that they're on the same side of the parallel lines, and they're both interior, so same side interior angles, which means sup. Okay? So, if I were to write an explanation for that, I would say if parallel lines are cut by a transversal, that's the part that's going to stay the same every time, then, well, now I would plug in whatever angle pair, so same side int angles are supplementary. Okay, and again, this is what changes. Now, for the equation, think about it. Congruent, we knew that the angles had to be the same. Supplementary, we know that the two angles have to add up to 180. So I'm not going to say 2x equals 90. However, I mean, that would work in this case, but I don't want you to get into bad habits. I want you to say that one angle plus the other angle has to equal 180 degrees. So when we solve this, we end up getting that x must be 45. Sorry, I went quick. If you need to, pause, get caught up. But yeah, we know that x has to be 45. Now, it works the same way with the other one, so I don't think we're going to need another explanation, but let's check. We see a y here, we see a y here. Okay, so these are also same side interior angles. So guys, you don't need to rewrite the explanation. It's the same explanation as the one before, but we do need to set this up and solve. So I would say one angle, y, plus my other angle, y minus 50, equals 180. Now just be careful, there's nothing to multiply the y minus 50 by, so we're just going to kind of rewrite this. And now we can combine like terms, right? I have two y's, so 2y minus 50 equals 180. Or I can add 50 to both sides, so 2y equals 230. And then lastly, I would divide by 2, y equals 115. Okay? 115. Okay. All right. So that's good for that. I think we're going to just do one of these next ones. Yeah, I'm already running pretty long on this. I'm sorry. Let's do one of these. All right, just to kind of show you what else we can do. Now, this is very similar to the ones above, but it's a little different because now it actually wants an angle measure, not just a variable. So make sure that you follow the instructions and get the correct answer. All right, it works the same way though. I see an angle here and here, so I know that the transversal has to be this line that's touching both of those angles, right? Now, I would say that both of these, like one's inside, one's outside, they're on the same side of the transversal. These are corresponding angles, guys, right? One's above, or actually, sorry, they're both above the parallel lines, or you could say one's inside, one's outside, but we know that these are corresponding angles, and we know corresponding angles are congruent. So when I write my statement, I'll say if parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then corresponding angles are congruent. All right, and that was what was changing. So I can say that this angle is congruent to this angle, or the angle measures have to be the same. So x plus 30 equals 2x minus 45. Okay? Well, now we just solve this. I'm going to add 45, which means that'll cancel. I'm going to subtract x and subtract x, which means that's going to cancel. And I will have a nice equation of 75 equals x. X, excuse me. All right. Now again, We don't want the variable x. We want the measure of DEF, so I need you to plug it in. Measure of DEF equals 75 plus 30, and that's 105, and so we would be done now. Okay, I'm going to end it here. I'm sorry that this was so long. I hope that it makes sense how we're setting up these equations, right? First things first, guys, you got to figure out the angle pair. From the angle pair, you figure out if it's congruent or sup. And then once you know if it's congruent or sup, there's two options for your equations. It's either going to be two angles are equal to each other, kind of like these. Or if they're supplementary, then you know that the two angles are going to have to sum to 180. All right, so there you have it, 3.2. Yeah, I don't know. Make sure to ask questions if you're having any trouble. Later.